Sonny Styles, first month in the NFL, the number 7 pick in the draft, and he's already wearing the green dot during minicamp, getting Durante Jones's defensive system fed directly into his ear. That doesn't happen. That doesn't happen to a rookie. And before you think this is just symbolic, in a minute I'm going to break down exactly why this one detail could raise the defensive ceiling for the Commanders in 2026. And also why there's a very uncomfortable question the coaching staff still hasn't answered about Week 1. But something else is happening that almost nobody in the DMV is talking about. Rachad White, 26-year-old running back, came in with no breaking news, no ESPN segment, nothing. And he might be the player who does the most to protect Jaden Daniels this season, not with his blocking, but by doing something a whole lot harder than that. I'll break down exactly why in a second, and why his connection with Daniels goes way back before Ashburn. And to close, Jeremy Reaves said out loud what nobody else in that locker room had the nerve to say. We won 5 games. If that doesn't light a fire in you, you're in the wrong business. That's not poster motivation. That's a veteran of nearly a decade in this organization, looking his teammates dead in the eyes and telling them the truth. What I care about isn't whether the room received it well, it's whether there are 6 or 7 more guys in that building carrying that same hunger. Because that's the difference between a real bounce back and another 5-win season. Raise hail, let's get into it. I need you to stop for a second and actually process this. There is a rookie in Washington, picked 7th overall in the 2026 draft, and that rookie is wearing the green dot during minicamp. The green dot, fam. The little piece of equipment that means the defensive coordinator is talking directly into your helmet, and you're the one passing that signal to the rest of the unit. It is literally the position of highest cognitive responsibility in the entire defense. And there's Sonny Styles, in his first month as a professional, calling plays for a unit that this organization is rebuilding from the ground up. So before I get into what this means tactically, I need to give you the real context of how Washington even got here. Because the story of the Commanders' defense in 2025 is basically a case study in what happens when a coordinator doesn't have the personnel to run his system. Joe Witt Jr. finished the year without a job. The defense finished last in yards allowed, 31st in opposing quarterback QBR, 27th in points. To say it plainly, any quarterback who came to Landover looked good, and it wasn't coincidence. It was structure, it was depth, it was speed, it was athleticism. Washington had none of that at the second level, so Adam Peters did what a smart general manager does. When you have a systemic problem, he didn't patch, he demolished. He hired a new defensive coordinator in Durante Jones. He signed Odafe Owe, Leo Chenal, Kalavon Chason, Charles Omenihu, Nick Cross. And in the draft, with the 7th pick, he went straight to find the player the scheme needs most at the second level. Sonny Styles out of Ohio State. Now, the name Durante Jones matters for one very specific reason. Jones spent the last 3 seasons as the passing game coordinator and defensive backs coach with the Minnesota Vikings under Brian Flores. And if you know Flores, you know exactly why that detail is everything. The Flores defense in Minnesota is, without exaggeration, the most singular defensive approach in professional football right now. That's not a fan take, that's a number. The Vikings blitzed on 49% of their snaps last season. The next closest team was at 38%. That gap, 11 percentage points, was as large as the gap between 2nd place and 22nd place in the entire league. This is not an aggressive scheme. This is a completely different football philosophy than everything else happening in the NFL. But what makes the Flores system genuinely dangerous is not just how much they blitz, it's when. Most defenses save the blitz for long down and distance, for 3rd and 7, for situations where the offense is almost certain to throw. Flores does not wait. He sends pressure on 1st down when the offense still has a run option available, when the quarterback is not expecting it. That creates confusion pre-snap. That forces rush decisions. That creates turnovers. The numbers backed it up. The Vikings finished 1st in pass rush win rate last season. First, fam. 16 players on that defense generated at least half a sack. 3 of their top pressure producers were interior defensive tackles. That's what happens when the system liberates players to get to the quarterback from the inside. Now, Jones has been careful to say his system isn't just a copy of what Flores ran. He gives credit to Mike Zimmer, to Marvin Lewis, to Vance Joseph, to Dave Aranda. That's intellectually honest. But Jones himself said Flores has been very instrumental in his development, and the scheme he's installing in Ashburn has every characteristic of the Minnesota DNA. Heavy zones, creative blitzing, layered pressure, pre-snap disguise. The Commanders are moving from being the 12th most man coverage heavy team in the league to a zone-first defense with aggressive blitz packages. That is a tectonic shift, and here is where Sonny Styles enters this conversation in a very serious way. Why the 7th pick? There are lots of ways to analyze that choice. The simplest one is to say Washington needed a linebacker. True, but that doesn't capture what Styles represents in this specific scheme. A Flores-inspired system demands that the green dot linebacker not only know the play, but be able to communicate the play while simultaneously covering a tight end in open space. That combination is genuinely rare in the NFL. Styles has it. 4.46 in the 40. Corner speed, classic linebacker size, and according to teammates in minicamp, the ability to process Durante Jones's system at a speed that is not normal for a rookie. Johnny Newton said it directly. Sonny Styles has adapted to professional football at an incredible speed. Those are not the words of a veteran being polite to a rookie. That is a second-round defensive tackle who has watched players cycle through this building without impact, telling you this kid is different. And Styles himself understands the assignment. He didn't arrive in the NFL thinking this was going to be easy. He said explicitly that he has high expectations for himself and that outside expectations don't bother him, that he came in with humility and a willingness to learn from scratch. That finding a veteran in the room, whether on offense or defense, to absorb the small habits from is part of his process. That's maturity you cannot manufacture. But I want to be honest about the uncomfortable question here too, because I think something isn't being said clearly enough. Putting the green dot on a rookie in minicamp doesn't automatically mean Styles carries that dot in week 1 of the regular season. Frankie Louvu was wearing the green dot in the early open practices. Leo Chenal is new but experienced, and depending on how responsibility gets distributed once the full defense is operating under training camp competition, Styles could share that role or even yield it temporarily while he continues building his system comprehension under actual game speed pressure. What is clear, and this is what genuinely excites me as a fan, is that the Washington coaching staff already trusts this kid's cognitive ability to receive the call from Jones and distribute it correctly under pressure, in a scheme where pre-snap communication is the difference between a working stunt and an easy touchdown on the other side. That is enormously valuable, and Newton is part of this story in an important way too. 2 seasons of injuries, good player, but he's never had the consistency to show everything he can do at this level. In 2026, he's fully healthy, in a scheme where interior tackles get individual pressure opportunities because the edge blitz frees up the inside. Newton has a real shot at being one of the most impactful defensive tackles in this division. He said it himself, he feels something brewing on this team. So do I, man. The question heading into training camp is simple. Can this group execute the Jones scheme at a level high enough that the rest of the NFC East notices? Because if this defense comes out playing with Minnesota's aggression, but with younger, faster personnel than Peters built this offseason, fam, the quarterbacks in this division are going to have a very long year. And since we're talking about players nobody is discussing enough, we have to talk about Rachad White. Look, I could be wrong here, but I think in December, when someone puts together the list of off-season acquisitions that actually mattered for Washington, Rachad White's name is going to be in that conversation. Right now, it's not even close to being there. White arrived without national media coverage, no breaking news alerts, no 4-minute segments on the morning shows. He came in as a 27-year-old running back out of Tampa Bay whose role most people would summarize in 3 words. Third down back, but that completely misses what David Blau is building with this offense. The problem Blau inherited wasn't an arm talent problem. Daniels has the arm, has the legs, has the decision making. The problem was structural. Under Cliff Kingsbury, the offense depended too heavily on extended plays. When the designed call didn't open up, Daniels escaped. That generated yards. It also generated hits. Hits that, if they accumulate on a quarterback this important to the franchise, eventually come with a very serious price tag. Blau has said explicitly that one of his priorities is reducing how much Daniels runs with the football, not eliminating it, because the scramble threat is a real tactical advantage, but protecting Daniels from unnecessary situations where the first read wasn't there, and the quarterback had to manufacture something from nothing. That's exactly where White fits in, a way no other running back on this roster can. In 4 years in Tampa Bay, White put up 2,656 rushing yards on 677 carries, 14 rushing touchdowns, but his receiving numbers are what actually matters for understanding why Peters brought him here. 205 receptions, 1,450 yards receiving, 11 receiving touchdowns. We are not talking about a running back who catches checkdowns out of desperation. We're talking about a player who can be schemed as a receiver, who can work option routes, who can operate screens with blockers in front, and who stays on the field in obvious passing situations without the defense reading anything. That last point is tactical, and it is critical. If Washington has to bring in a third receiver on third down, the defense reads the formation and adjusts. If Washington keeps White in the backfield like it's a normal down and White releases into the route, the opposing defense has maybe half a second less to process what's happening. In professional football, that half second is the difference between a clean reception and a pass breakup. There's something else nobody in national media is mentioning about this pairing. Jaden Daniels and Rachad White played together at Arizona State. That's not a trivial footnote. Daniels has, like all good quarterbacks, a natural tendency to find the guys he trusts when a play breaks down. It's the Brian Flores of playing quarterback. It was documented with Rodgers and Adams. With Brady and Gronkowski, I'm not comparing anyone to that level yet. I'm saying that familiarity creates trust shortcuts you simply cannot build in a training camp. A reporter who covered minicamp said on social media that White looked visibly fast in practice, that he was already creating early vibes of a player who's going to eat in David Blau's offense. And that was just in May minicamp. Imagine training camp. The question nobody is asking is this: can White fill a role similar to what Christian McCaffrey did in San Francisco when the 49ers were a nightmare for opposing defenses? I'm not talking about McCaffrey's numbers because those are unrepeatable. I'm talking about the tactical concept. Having a running back threatening enough as a receiver that defensive coordinators face an impossible pre-snap decision. If you cover White with a linebacker, he's too slow for that. If you put a corner in the backfield, you open the run gap. If you bring the safety, you leave the outside corner in a tough situation. That, fam, is spacing in its most fundamental form. White is not going to be the primary option for anyone on this offense. Daniels will distribute. Terry McLaurin will be the WR1 we expect him to be. Zach Ertz will cover the middle when healthy. But in the moments where the game is tight, where the clock is moving, where Blau needs Daniels to make the easy decision instead of creating improvised magic, White is going to be the release valve that protects this franchise. And if the system works, Washington is going to have shorter third down distances because White is converting before they even get to the hard downs. And to close out today, a short story that hit me in a way I was not expecting. Jeremy Reaves opened his mouth during minicamp and said something that professional athletes almost never say in public. He said, "We won 5 games last year. That should be all the motivation anyone needs. If that doesn't add enough pep in your step, you're in the wrong field." That was almost word for word. And when I read that for the first time, I stopped. Not because it's explosive or scandalous, but because in a world where professional athletes are trained to speak in corporate language, to say things like we're focused on improvement, and we've got a great group in that room, a player like Reaves, who's been in this organization for close to a decade, who earned All-Pro on special teams in 2022, who was a starter on the team that made the NFC Championship game, telling his teammates publicly that what they did last year was unacceptable, that carries actual weight. Washington went 5-12 after reaching the conference final. That kind of drop in production, in momentum, in energy was one of the most brutal single-season collapses we've seen in the modern era of this franchise. And the natural temptation after a year like that is to talk about injuries and bad luck and context, all of which had some truth to it. But Reaves didn't go looking for context. He went straight to the result. We won 5 games. Period. That wasn't good enough. And if that doesn't burn inside of you every time you walk into this facility, then you shouldn't be here. That is locker room leadership, not the Super Bowl speech kind, the kind that looks teammates in the eyes during June OTAs and tells them the truth. What I want to monitor from this statement isn't whether it was well received. It almost certainly was. What I want to know is whether there are 5, 6, 7 more players in that room carrying that same hunger, because a bounce back season in the NFL isn't built by one veteran safety on the back half of a career. It's built by a group that collectively decided what happened last year is never happening again. Based on what we're seeing in minicamp and training camp will tell us a lot more. It looks like that group might actually exist. Sonny Styles studying film during his month off before camp. Johnny Newton feeling something brewing, Rachad White moving like he's got something to prove, and Jeremy Reaves saying it out loud for everyone to hear. This franchise has 50 years of history. It has John Riggins running over the Dolphins in Super Bowl 17. It has Art Monk. It has Darrell Green. It has Sean Taylor, God rest his soul. And over the last 3 years, it's had something back that we almost lost for good. The feeling that something real is being built in Ashburn. 5 wins last year was a scar that hurt all of us. But if Reaves' hunger is the thermostat in that locker room, fam, the 2026 season can be something special. Raise hail, always. If this video gave you something, drop the like, subscribe, and tell me down in the comments. Do you think Sonny Styles is ready to run the green dot as the starter from week 1? Or does he need to ease in by sharing that role with Luvu first? Write it below. I read every single one.